Good afternoon. Hello, welcome to today's Workers' Compensation Roundtable. We are joined today by Ben Kreider with the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. Before we get to Ben's presentation, I do want to just share a couple of quick announcements. I'm sure you are all aware and have seen by now that tickets for Paralegal Day are available for purchase now. They went on sale about a week or so ago. You can visit our website to purchase your tickets. I believe, well, I'm not certain if we are still in early bird pricing, and we perhaps are not. We are still in early bird pricing. Early bird pricing is available through April the 21st. So you can go online and you can purchase your tickets for Paralegal Day. Paralegal Day this year is on May the 20th. That is the third Monday of May, as always. We are going to be meeting at 5:30 at Creekside Event Center back in Gahanna, where we were last year. Beautiful venue, beautiful event space. Today, or this year, we're very excited about our keynote speaker. We will be joined by Ohio Supreme Court Justice Michael P. Donnelly, and I'm very much interested and looking forward to what he has to share with us. So if you've not had a chance to do that, please do go online and purchase your tickets for that. And I think that is pretty much the only announcement we will have to share. Unfortunately, applications for scholarships, service awards, and awards of excellence, those nominations have all closed. We are in the midst of making our selections, and those awards will be announced during Paralegal Day on May the 20th. We will go ahead and get started now. As I mentioned, we are joined today by Ben Kreider. He is a director of hearing services for the Bureau's legal department. The unit is primarily responsible for statewide administrative hearing coverage, representing the Bureau before the Industrial Commission of Ohio. He also serves as legal counsel to the Special Investigations Department, fondly known as the Fraud Unit. And he has been with the Bureau of Workers' Comp since 2011. Prior to that, after graduating from the Ohio State University College of Law, he spent 10 years at a private firm representing employers and injured workers. So he's very familiar with the workers' comp system and we will just call him a subject matter expert. Ben is an avid camper and dog lover. He was born and raised in Indiana and is a huge Indianapolis Colts fan. He, unfortunately, I'm sure, for those of you who have survived the trauma, has two teenagers at home. So I'm sure that keeps his life in much chaos. And I say that all tongue in cheek. Welcome, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your time and your expertise. And I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Angie, and thank you for having me, everybody. Good afternoon. Angie, it's not tongue-in-cheek. It is a war zone sometimes with teenagers. So there's nothing tongue-in-cheek about that.
And I will just mention briefly, if you have questions along the way for Ben, please feel free to raise your hand, unmute, jump in, put your question in chat. I will monitor that and bring questions to Ben as they arise. So Ben, you won't need to worry about monitoring the chat. That's a bit much to handle.
Okay, cool. Because yeah, I can only see my PowerPoint. I'm not messing with any other screens to mess this up.
Right. I understand. So with that, go right ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Again, good afternoon, everybody. So the Special Investigations Department is a statewide unit that's housed in the Bureau. I think they have about 100 to 200 employees all over the state. And what I'm going to tell you about each different unit and the different types of fraud that each unit handles. And they also, Special Investigations, at the end, I'll talk about some stuff that they do outside of fraud with assisting with safe workplaces and VSSRs and some of the cool technology that they've implemented over the past few years. So first of all, I want to, since we're all in the legal field here, I want to start with some Ohio law, and then I'll get to the good stuff. If you're new to workers' comp, if you don't find this fraud presentation interesting, I've got bad news for you. It doesn't get much more interesting and sexy, if you will, in workers' compensation than the fraud stuff. So I'll start with some of the boring stuff. So the Bureau's statutory authority, all the revised code is all our Ohio laws, and the Bureau is wholly created by statute. So we're bound by millions and millions of laws and rules. But where the Special Investigations Department gets their authority starts with 4123.511, which gives the Bureau, and it's Section A here, gives the Bureau, actually requires the Bureau, because it says shall, investigate facts concerning any injury or occupational disease in whatever manner is most appropriate. And, that includes obtaining statements from the employee, employer, physicians, witnesses, in whatever manner is most appropriate. So that's pretty broad authority to start with. And obviously not only applies to the Special Investigations Department, but our claims staff, which handle initial determinations when it comes to any regular workers' compensation claim. But that's where the Bureau's authority starts. So then we start getting into more specifics regarding the Special Investigations Department and where their duties and powers come from. So 4121.13 provides that our administrator, which then when the statutes say our administrator, that basically falls on the whole Bureau's responsibilities. The administrator shall investigate all cases of fraud or other illegalities pertaining to the operation of the comp system and its funds. And the administrator has every power of an inquisitorial nature granted to the Industrial Commission. So for those of you, and most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the Industrial Commission, is our own little administrative court system in the workers' comp world. So all of the powers that they have with regard to questioning individuals, etc., the Bureau is granted those powers too. And again, first sentence of this section F of 4121.13 says the Bureau has a duty to investigate all cases of fraud or other illegalities. So the next statute, 4121.15, is really the meat. It gives the Special Investigations Department more power than you might think upon first blush. So 0.15 says the administrator and his designees, which means our investigators, our fraud agents, for the purposes mentioned in the workers' comp code, they may administer oaths, so they can take sworn testimony, certify to official acts, and this next one is really big, issue subpoenas. So the Special Investigations Department, when I talk a little bit further about the different types of fraud that they investigate, we have the power to issue subpoenas for information that we might not otherwise be entitled to without a release from the individual whose information is being sought. So, you usually hear the issuance of subpoenas in the context of court proceedings, but we are actually given that legal authority from the Ohio legislature. So we can subpoena bank records, subpoena businesses for information, etc. So that's really powerful. And we can issue subpoenas in regular claims. Like if I'm handling a regular claim for the Bureau that involves a doctor or provider that's not giving us medical records as they are supposed to, we can issue a subpoena for them and compel them to do it. I'm very careful with that subpoena power, and I use it very judiciously because it is very a powerful tool in the arsenal. Kind of following right along with that, this section of the statute also gives us the power to compel attendance of witnesses and production of papers, so we can basically issue a subpoena for attendance, for testimony, etc. And then that statute also gives, what's the remedy if somebody doesn't comply? We basically a contempt of court, can file in the appropriate court of common pleas, ask for or contempt proceedings issued against the person that's not abiding by our subpoena or other request. So the first thing you might think of when you think, probably the first thing you will think of when you think of workers' compensation fraud is the traditional injured worker fraud, where somebody's working while they're receiving benefits and they're not supposed to be. And I'll get to that stuff later. But there are different kinds of fraud. So we have a whole employer fraud unit to start with. Since the 90s, we've had the SID has had an employer fraud unit. And we also pursued amending the workers' comp fraud statute to provide penalties for employer fraud situations. And we tried to make them on par with penalties for injured workers and for healthcare providers. So the previous penalties for employers, they were just minor misdemeanors. But today and for a while now, they are felonies. And back around that time too, there was a study done that like what type of employer fraud is out there. And what the study said, after reviewing information and data and years of information from employers, that those types of fraud include intentionally refusing to obtain or maintain workers' comp insurance. So in Ohio, thankfully, we've got a very robust system compared to other states, but it is a law that every employer in the state of Ohio has to have workers' compensation insurance. So one of the types of fraud is trying to skirt that employers might attempt. Also, their premiums are based upon payroll, so they might and do we see it underreport their actual payroll to reduce their premiums. They might alter certificates of coverage to show active coverage when they don't have it, and also misclassifying workforce. So if you've got a bunch of roofers or tree trimmers, their premiums are going to be higher than an office worker or a desk employee. So they might try to misclassify their actual employees that are working for them to try to get lower premiums. Those are the types of investigations the employer fraud unit has. Here's some more examples. Create new policies in order to avoid experience and balances on old policies. So I owe a whole bunch of money under my old policy. I close that out. Rename the business, same business, get a new policy. I suddenly have a clean slate. A big one we see is the independent contractor stuff. It's it's often used by, I see most businesses, probably the majority are like trucking companies and roofing companies, say all of their employees are independent contractors. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on the definition of independent contractors because that's a whole laundry list of complicated factors. It's not just one thing. But if you do honestly have only independent contractors and you're basically a general contractor, then those independent contractors are not your employees. So employers will oftentimes try to do that in an effort to avoid premiums. Then the standard intentionally issuing bad checks or credit cards, basically just trying to get out of pain. So the impact of this fraud may be obvious, this type of fraud, but it increases cost of doing business in Ohio. And then those businesses theoretically that don't have to pay workers' comp can do business for cheaper. So regular employees might lose business. And then, it's going to increase overall cost to everybody who's abiding by the rules and legitimately paying it into the system. So these are the types of we see that I just discussed. So the intentionally refusing, underreporting, altering certificates, those should come as no surprise. Again, we have a statewide team here of employer fraud, an employer fraud unit. And like every other unit, we've got agents all over the state. They examine data, examine payroll, act on tips, just like our other units. So the second type of fraud that we investigated, and again, a statewide team with its whole unit within a unit of SID, is the healthcare provider team. So this team investigates doctors, nurses, facilities, etc., and I'll get into some of the types of things they investigate there. And I've got a pretty cool video to show you regarding our healthcare provider team. But again, it's another statewide team. So the difference between each unit, the employer, the claimant, and the healthcare provider team has special agents and fraud analysts. Those are our internal BWC classifications. Special agents are basically the ones that go out and do the field work. Fraud analysts are the ones that the special agents bring all their findings to, who then puts it all together. There's also a nurse on our staff to look at any medical questions our agents might have. Criminal investigators is another, basically a special agent, but just with less taxing duties. Again, we investigate, the healthcare provider team investigates medical providers, pharmacies, MCOs, anything that might have to do with the medical side of the house in the workers' compensation area. The types of cases they mostly see are when the first one, service is not rendered, it's when a doctor or facility bills the Bureau for services that they simply didn't complete for any individual injured worker. Upcoding is when they, you've got one level of service that costs this much, but they bill for a different service that might be in the same sort of type of treatment, but it's a higher level than the service that they actually provided. So they get reimbursed, basically get reimbursed more for doing less. Unbundling is when you bill for two separate treatment codes when there's one code that would apply for, that's inclusive of all the treatment you gave. So you're basically stacking. And then double billing is just, you're blatantly billing us and some other insurance company for the, or Medicaid or Medicare for the exact same service you just provided the injured worker. As far as pill mill operations go, we've done a lot of work with law enforcement and with the feds to try to assist in shutting down pill mill operations where it's basically just line and in and out and the opioid crisis and all of that good stuff, and we try to shut that down. Injury mills, that's a little bit harder to prove, but it's just where there's constant billing and treatment for things that the injured workers don't need. So we do our best, and we go in by, when we try to find something like an injury mill, data analysis is a key. We look at the doctor's bills coming in, how much they're billing us, whether or not, how it looks on par with all other physicians in the state. If we see a doctor that's just disproportionately billing us through the roof versus everybody else, then it kind of raises a red flag. So a lot of times investigations will start like that. We do surveillance when we get a tip, be it, we take tips in many different ways for all of these different kinds of frauds, anonymous tips, scorned spouses, you name it, they come in every way. So when we get a tip and we figure out that maybe a doctor's not, billing us for services not rendered or other things, we'll do surveillance. And it's really interesting that our agents will pose as patients and go into these doctors' offices. And the SID has all sorts of gadgets when it comes to cameras. They've got cameras in purses, cameras in watches, cameras in key fobs, cameras in water bottles that look just like this that have water in them. And I'll show you an example later on of a time they used this, a camera in a water bottle. And the video I'm going to show you here of an undercover operation in the doctor's office was a purse camera. Now, when they go into these doctor's offices for treatment, they've got a very deep cover. We work with the feds to get working fake, but they work Social Security numbers with Social Security cards. We've worked with private insurance companies to get insurance cards that actually will run through and come out as legit the first time one of our employees might show up and register as a patient. So those are our undercover operations. Some of the surveillance too is outside. So if we see a doctor, if we see a discrepancy in a doctor's billing, we'll do head counts to see how many patients they may have in a particular day go in and out, and then compare that with their billing. We'll also set up, and that would be an example of a manned surveillance. We'll do unmanned surveillance too, where we'll set up like a pole cam that just records 24 hours a day for as ever long as we want it up there. And then our agents will go back and review the film and the data. And then obviously interviews, will interview injured workers, interview provider staff. And sometimes too, when there's it's not just workers' compensation involved in some of these provider cases, we'll assist local law enforcement with search warrants. We've got a whole digital forensics unit in the Special Investigations Department. They're housed in the basement here in downtown of our building. And it's really cool down there. It's I don't know how familiar any of you are with James Bond, but it really looks like MI6. They've got computers that can read encrypted data and store it encrypted, and it's on par with law enforcement in that it creates a encrypted bundle that the chain of evidence can be tracked and can be used in court. So we have those tools, and we will assist local law. Sometimes we assist federal law enforcement with warrant searches and et cetera. So the next video I'm about to show you, or the video I'm about to show you, is one of our undercover operations in, I think this was a chiropractor. I can't remember where it was, maybe up northeast Ohio. But our agent went in, we had allegations in this case of billing for services not rendered. I think there might have been some overbilling too. And you know, after we did all the investigation, everything we could, based upon data analytics and patient interviews, we sent one of our agents in. This is from a purse cam, and there's no sound, but I'll play the video here for you. So that's our agent. There's the doctor. It's also a lot of times these treatment codes for services provided, they're time-based as well. So this case too, he was billing us for a certain time for performing these treatments, and this video helped show that he was not completing the treatment according to the prescribed time frame. And nothing here you'll see is real egregious. It's just kind of lackadaisical, you know. But you'll get to a point here where he takes out, I think it's coming up here, he'll take out a tool that's a legitimate therapy device. However, it's a acupuncture gun, but there's no needle in the acupuncture gun. So obviously what he's doing when he's clicking it around here, clicking it around her neck, clicking around her ears, it's not doing anything. And we'll do a number of these. We don't just go in once when we undergo the effort to perform an undercover operation. We go in multiple times so we can prove a pattern of sustained conduct. Because these cases, unlike the injured workers fraud that I'll talk about next, you know, we don't go do anything with these administratively. These go straight to the prosecutor's office to review for criminal charges. And there's a section at the Attorney General's office. It's the healthcare fraud section that we work closely with. They're not our attorneys. They are prosecutors, and they routinely prosecute these types of cases. You can see this appears to be from another visit. I bunched it together for highlights here. It looks like our agent changed clothes. But this doctor, I think he did plead guilty to workers' compensation fraud.
So Ben, what happens in a situation like that if a provider pleads guilty to workers' comp fraud? What are the consequences? What happens?
He'll be, whatever happens with the medical board is outside of our control, but he'll most likely lose his doctor's privileges and license. For us, our medical services will decertify him, and he will no longer be able to be a provider for workers' compensation services in Ohio. Because all of the doctors that are allowed to bill us, they have to be certified by us, and they have to comply with basically a contract on conduct, and there's a whole list of things that they have to be able to do to be able to be in our system. Okay, now the claimant fraud, the first thing that everybody thinks of that you see on the news, and I've got a news clip for you later. Again, this a statewide team. We've got this unit divided up into sections, as you can see, a west, northeast, and southeast. Investigate allegations of fraud perpetrated by claimants, and then this is where my attorneys are involved a lot, because we don't have to, but typically we go to the Industrial Commission and request a finding of administrative/civil fraud and overpayment. And then after that, it'll be referred again to the Attorney General's office for prosecution. So this is both in the administrative and outside of the Bureau in the criminal setting. And there are different types of cases. The one you think of first probably is working while receiving like temporary total disability compensation. I can't work anywhere. I'm working. A lot of these we find through cross matches with ODJFS, because injured workers that are conducting this behavior when working while they're not supposed to, if they're working at a legit place that's not paying cash under the table, they don't realize that that legit business is reporting their wages to ODJFS for unemployment tax purposes. So we will get cross matches, and I don't know how, maybe once a week, once a month, we cross match with ODJFS. And if that gives us a hit that we've got somebody on benefits and somebody that's got wages reported to ODJFS, obviously that's going to open a case. All of these two, we come in the same way, even without that cross match. We've got anonymous tips, we've got neighbors, whatever the case may be. We've got open fraud hotline by phone, email, etc. So they come in all different ways, and then SID will look into it and see what's going on, see if they want to open it or close it unfounded, or just what the case may be. Physical activity cases, those are where we don't really have any wages, but somebody is performing activity that's wholly consistent with their injuries and with what they're reporting to their doctors, what they're reporting to the Bureau, what they're reporting to the Industrial Commission. So those, and I'll show you a couple examples of those, because those are the ones that, again, can lead to the undercover operations and the most likely to lead to the undercover operations and the surveillance, because you got somebody wheeling into the Industrial Commission in a wheelchair, and then later on that day they're bebopping around town out of the wheelchair like nothing happened. And I've had a number of those exact situations over my years. False claims are a little more rare. It's basically when somebody says, this happened to me at work, I got hurt, but nothing happened. I think I've only maybe had one or two of those over the years. It's just, I don't know why, it's just less likely to happen. Then, of course, you've got always dealing with drug deception and drug seeking behavior. And there's actually case law out there. I don't know, probably some of you have heard of it or even relied upon it. There's case law out there that said, we had a case way back in the day where an injured worker was on TT, I think it was TT again, and was getting their prescriptions. It was basically selling drugs, got arrested and convicted of being a drug dealer. The court Court found that that was basically employment, which is very interesting and in conflict with the receipt of temporary total disability compensation, and was thus therefore also workers' compensation fraud. Okay, so the first, going to give you a couple injured worker case study examples here from real life. The first one is, so this individual, we actually received the allegation from the employer of record, alleging that she was working, and again, that physical activities thing, performing activities inconsistent with her injury. So when we get a tip like that, again, the normal protocol is that SID will review the claim, look at the medical reports, find out what she's complaining about, what her restrictions are, what she's telling the doctors, what the injuries are, what's allowed in the claim, what type of benefits is she on or requesting, etc. Then they went out and started conducting surveillance, and I'll show you some of the results of those surveillance. They'll do interviews once, a lot of times based upon the tip from the employer, and then the surveillance that they do, they'll identify subjects that may be interacting with her, and conduct those interviews. And then I'll show you some examples. So criminal law is way outside of my world, but some of the aspects, obviously, with this fraud stuff bleed into our workers' comp world. And criminal, the intent is really sometimes the hardest part to prove with these fraud cases, because you have to prove that they knew or should have known that what they were doing was fraudulent, essentially. So we have a lot of language built into our various forms, including C84s for temporary total, etc., with fraud language. And the whole point of that language, and the reason it's interjected all over the place in our forms, is to assist to bolster that fraud argument if indeed we find that you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. So once that's done and we complete the investigation, we've submitted to the Industrial Commission for a finding of administrative fraud and termination of compensation if they are currently on it, and if that's warranted, as well as an overpayment if, depending on what the evidence says, that she got paid she wasn't entitled to. Then after we get that finding, generally then it goes to the Attorney General's office. Now, again, it doesn't have to go in that order of Industrial Commission to AG's office. It just naturally happens that way sometimes. And it's also a good litmus test. If we can't get a fraud finding civilly, administratively, there's no way we're going to refer it over for a criminal prosecution, because the burden of proof, the standard, as you know, is much higher. So in this injured workers medical reports, these are some of the blurbs taken exactly from the injured worker's claim that she reported to the doctors. This involved right ankle and right foot problems. States she still cannot walk with her foot, intolerable pain, can't walk. Doctor says when I even get close to trying to touch her foot, she's very resistant because she knows it will cause pain. Unable to put weight on her right leg. It was noted that without a sock, she was unable to put her right foot on the ground. Not able to walk on forefoot at this point, using a cane for steadiness. It's very important. States that her pain is constant, 8 out of 10. It's continuous. Everything, touching it, wind, air, water, pressure, shoes, cold, everything hurts. Nothing gives her relief. Again, this is that initial stage of let's review the documents and see what they say. And now let's go see outside in the real world if those complaints match up. Again, this employer too, when they gave us the tip, said she was at culinary school also, which necessarily wouldn't be in violation of the receipt of temporary total disability compensation in and of itself. It would just depend what she was doing at the culinary school. So we went out and did some surveillance. Here's some of the pictures we took. Remember those medical records I just showed you. Said she can't walk without a cane. Well, I know this background here on this first picture. That's her coming from an Industrial Commission hearing. This is downtown at our building using a cane. The one on the far right is at her doctor's office. We got the video from the doctor using the cane. Look at the ones in between, close in proximity and time to these other two. Here she is with her culinary. I forget what those are called. And I watch so many cooking shows, I should know. Smock. Here she is walking around, no cane, obviously carrying a child. I think they even got surveillance of her maybe exercising and running. So then they conducted the interviews based upon what they saw on surveillance. So this first blurb is from one of her instructors at the culinary school. Never seen her use a cane. Both classes met for 3 hours, 5 days a week, and consisted of a 30-minute lecture and a 2.5-hour lab. Again, remember, compare those to what she was saying to the doctors. Next one, same thing. Another instructor, never witnessed using crane, crutches, etc. The last two, I believe, are from her doctor, her actual doctor. We went out and interviewed him. Yeah, Dr. So-and-so stated, could no longer believe that the injured worker had reported living limitations. And the doctor stated his understanding based upon visits and statements that she had to use a cane or walking boot to ambulate. And then, really important for our fraud case, he would have never, at least for the overpayment, he would have never certified the CD4/Medco, and I'm sure you guys know that's what's needed to certify and pay temporary total disability compensation between these dates and those dates. If he had known and seen what she was really doing outside, he wouldn't have certified. So the intent review that I mentioned earlier, this is some of our standard fraud language. I believe this is from CD4. And this again helps because the injured worker has to sign this. So this is always part of our report of investigation when we go to ask for a fraud finding, that I understand I'm not permitted to work. I'm not making any false statements or concealment of fact, yada, yada, yada. And that anybody that knowingly does that, knowingly accepts compensation, could be criminally prosecuted. So I'm going to play you a video here that was on the news about this case. It's kind of dated. It's from a while ago. One of our guys that's in this video, as the rest of us do, don't look quite as young anymore. But stand by. Here you go.
ABC6 is on Waste Watch, tracking new cases of workers' compensation fraud. The state announced 12 people were busted milking the system just in June. Investigator Brooks DeRose has the undercover video that exposes these crooks. Brooks?
Millions of dollars going to people who faked injuries or played the system. The Bureau of Workers' Compensation says it's constantly taking tips to investigate, stop, and prosecute workers' comp fraud. Watching this surveillance video, you wouldn't think anything is wrong. Brooklyn Mexikowski is caught on camera outside her home going to culinary school or getting physically fit. But a few weeks later, Brooklyn is walking with a cane to her Bureau of Workers' Compensation hearing. She claimed she was hurt on the job, but this BWC investigation video shows that was not the case.
It still amazes me that people will still try to steal a dollar rather than, keep that for the legitimate injured people.
Dan Fodor is with the intelligence unit of the BWC. His team of investigators have more than 1,000 active investigations right now. Fodor says just this past year, they've recovered $60 million from people like Brooklyn who fake injuries to get benefits. She was charged with fraud and had to pay more than $10,000 back.
We're here to help weed out the bad people so those that are entitled to benefits can continue to get those benefits.
Tips and red flags lead them to others gaming the system, like Shannon Rager, who investigators say was getting money for a leg injury. Caught on camera, he's seen walking around and working as a tow truck driver and mechanic. Investigators busted him and made him pay more than $2,000 to WC.
Just know that there's many of us looking for them every day, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, however long it takes. We're watching.
Tracking those who try to take employers' money that they don't deserve.
Now, if you see fraud, report it. We put information.
Okay, a little bit sensationalized, as is always with the news, but you get the picture, and you got to see some of the actual surveillance videos in that clip. So again, she pled guilty to a misdemeanor and was ordered to pay restitution. Okay, the second case I've got is basically
Ben?
another, yeah,
I'm sorry, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Just for those of us who have not been around the block a zillion times, I've noticed that whenever there is a court proceeding with criminal charges for workers' comp fraud, regardless of where it happened, what city the injured worker lives in, it always is prosecuted here in Franklin County. Is that correct?
Not always. It can be, but sometimes we do go to local prosecutors,
Okay.
depending on what the prosecutors do. But when we refer it over to the AG's office here in Columbus, it's always brought here in Columbus.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sometimes just, and again, that's kind of out of our control what prosecutor it goes to. The vast majority are handled by the healthcare fraud unit in Columbus. But sometimes local prosecutors are involved when they don't want it or they don't have time to
Okay.
handle it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. The next one I have is really interesting. And it's, again, you've heard it a million times. Those of you with kids have told your kids a million times. Don't put stupid stuff on social media. So with this injured worker, we got a source, again, I think it was anonymous, from he worked out at the local YMCA, and he tipped us off that this injured worker was involved in weightlifting too at a local YMCA, and that he was in there bragging and he was on disability and quote getting free money. So again, we do the normal review the claim, review medical reports, and review social media. That's pretty much standard operating procedure for any start of an investigation. Now, again, I told you we have a whole digital forensics unit that will go out and review public information on social media. Anything that we review or see is public. We don't try to go and befriend somebody under false pretenses and get access to their private stuff. Everything we use, these people just post on various forms of social media. Well, we found some stuff on this one. This one also involved an undercover operation, and the video that I'm going to show you was, in fact, from, again, a water bottle that looks just like this, that specially made, that has a camera in it. And this is our guy. So the social media that we pulled, again, this is from a number of years ago. And look at what he's posting on there. Wow, what a night. And he's on temporary total disability compensation while he's posting this stuff. What a night. Worked on the bench, 315, 320, 330, 350. This is a lot. This is heavy lifting. Great day at the gym. Benching was totally game hitting, 360. All sorts of fun stuff. 405 raw is around the corner. Not sure what that means, but he's obviously a very experienced weightlifter. And again, this is all on his social media. This picture that you're seeing was pulled from, I think, his Facebook. So we set up the undercover at the gym. I'll let you take a look at that. And this claim involved, so it was bad thoracic conditions. The medical evidence at the time of this investigation states that he's demonstrating loss of range of motion in the shoulders and flexibility of the lower back and hamstrings. These losses are likely attributable to his thoracic spine injury, limiting his upper extremity use. He gets weakness laying in bed. If he goes to move, more tense in the back and the mid-thoracic area, still having persistent tenderness in the parathoracic muscle region. And listen to what his restrictions were for lifting at the time of this investigation. So the doctors said, and this I think was on the Medco 14, he can never lift 26 to 50 pounds or 51 to 100 pounds. He can only occasionally lift 21 to 25 pounds. He is allowed to frequently lift 11 to 20 pounds, and he's continuously can lift up to 5 pounds and 6 to 10 pounds. So there he is lifting a bit more than that. Okay, he pled guilty. He was a lot larger amount, and he got into felonies. Sentenced to jail. It's usually, I've never seen somebody initially just go to jail in one of these claims. It's all usually always suspended. The only time I've seen that go awry for them is if they refuse to make restitution or abide by any conditions like community control, et cetera, that the court may impose on them. Okay, finally, one last unit I want to talk to you about in special investigations that does not involve fraud is our safety violations and investigative unit. They are tasked according to statute to ensure the safe work environment and are dealing a lot of times with VSSRs, which is violation of specific safety requirements, whole list of rules on what those are, and they're very, as the name entails, specific to any various situation. So if an injured worker in their claim thinks that the employer violated a specific safety requirement, then they file an application. The SVIU will go and they have to do an investigation. The investigation is objective and impartial. They don't form opinions. They simply gather evidence to put into the format of a report to be filed for the Ohio Industrial Commission. These can be big deals to employers if they get dinged for one. The Industrial Commission has the discretion to grant an award to up to 50%, minimum 15, but up to 50% of the maximum allowable weekly compensation granted to the injured worker. What that means, over the life of the claim, whatever comp is paid, the employer is going to be on the hook for basically 50% of that, of the maximum allowable weekly comp. So at the max rate, 50% of the life of the claim, all compensation paid, and it is paid to the injured worker by the employer as a penalty, dollar for dollar. So they don't get any benefits of the state insurance fund if they're found to have violated a VSSR causing an injured worker's injury. It's a straight penalty, dollar for dollar, to the injured worker over the life of the claim, the amount depending on the percent awarded. SVIU is also, they also investigate a lot of times unilaterally catastrophic injuries or fatalities as they occur and as we find out about them. So we might find out about them from an employer that says, oh, my plant just blew up here. Boom, we send a team of agents out there to start gathering evidence to conserve it as it goes along. So catastrophic and fatalities. And even if a lot of times one of our agents might see a news story, and we'll send agents out there right away again, so we can get the jump on the investigation.
Now, the investigators that serve in this capacity and do the investigations for VSSRs, are they dedicated to this type of investigation?
Yes.
So they don't do the healthcare fraud. They don't do the receiving temporary total while working.
Right.
Okay.
The safety violations unit is a wholly separate unit, just like the other ones. A few years ago, SVIU started using drones, and none of the other units use drones for surveillance or anything like that. We're not going to get into those legalities, but SVIU will use drones for investigations, and we can go out and get shots that we're never able to get before that technology came out. So you saw the ground view of this, and I think somebody fell off a roof here, but now we can get an aerial view. And our pilots of the drones have to go through, I think it might be federal. It's a pretty rigorous standard certification process to be able to use and fly these drones in the capacity that they do. And I was kind of proud of SVIU back in the day and SID because the Bureau was really on the ground floor when it came to drone use by government agencies. And they used to, I don't know if they still do, but they used to get a ton of calls from out-of-state agencies and places all over the United States asking them about the program, asking them to train with them. Sometimes other agencies will even ask us for help in an investigation they might be handling if we could bring out our drones and assist with them. So you can see we get shots that we could have never gotten before. This was a roof collapse here. This next one, here's the ground floor. You can see the roof dipping. That looks like the point where things went wrong right there, that broken board up top. But now we can go up. We can get an aerial view of it. And they also, I don't have the video loaded in right now. They also have the software that takes the drone's footage. You know, they'll fly the drone around and it'll take the drone's footage and they put it in this software, and it's 3D map making software, and basically gives them a 3D interactive display of the whole accident site. So it's really interesting. It's almost like Google Maps, but you can zoom down and zoom in and travel around virtually around the scene of an accident. Okay, that's all I have now. Be happy to take any questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Ben?
I've got one. Hi, this is Susan. Excuse me. So in your special investigations, if the Bureau found out about, like you had mentioned, a catastrophe, like something blew up at a plant or something, and they went out to investigate, what would happen? I mean, usually the system is set up so an injured worker would need to file for a claim or benefits. What if that did not happen? Like, what would be the Bureau's role if they found something in that investigation? Would they file,
Yes. So we won't use that investigation. We don't use it to file it because we don't have the standing to file a VSSR for the injured worker. Now, when it comes to filing a claim or us being put on notice of a claim, that can become a little bit more, our role in that can become a little bit more tricky because, we can't actually file a claim on behalf of an injured worker, but we'll make sure to notify them or their dependents and what their rights might be if they want to file one or they need to file one. So it just depends on the case, depends on the circumstances, depends what's going on. We'll make a report from that initial investigation, regardless of what happens, regardless of and if a claim's filed, we will then put that report into the claim file unless a VSSR claim gets filed before we get that report into the claim file. Then that halts all of our investigative material that's going to go into the claim file until our investigation is complete.
that makes sense.
I also, one thing I forgot I was going to mention, the SID does investigations on behalf of self-insured employers too. So
Yes.
any of you that represent self-insured employers, if you have one of these tips, and I represented a lot of self-insured employers back in the day before I really realized the tools that were at my disposal when it came to fraud allegations, and that I could have the Bureau and they will treat it as any state fund claim when it comes to the investigation of fraud.
Okay.
And then at the end, depending on what the findings are, that information will basically be presented to the self-insured employer as, hey, we think this, and we've drafted a motion if you want to file this. Sometimes we don't think it's warranted, but the SI employer still does. So we'll say, here's the information, you do with it what you will.
Okay, that was good. That was one of the questions that I had is, to what extent do you work with self-insured employers? What's your role in those things? Do you ever have self-insured employers that come to you and say, we have allegations, but, our investigator didn't find anything. Can you take another look? How
Yeah.
does that process come about?
Yeah, totally. Any tip or inquiry we get from a self-insured employer is going to be treated as any tip or inquiry we get from anybody else, and we'll vet it and we'll look into it just like any other. We don't treat them any differently as far as the tools at our disposal and the protocol when it comes to investigating the allegations.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Judith. Just a real quick question. What would you say are maybe some of the most critical functions for paralegals who are working in the investigations?
So the paralegal side of our house is so special investigations department is separate from the legal department. I just happen to be the legal liaison that works with SID in their capacity. So our legal department is the one that houses our paralegals. And I just recently hired a new one not too long ago because I had one of 30 years retire. So right now, the paralegals that we have working here, they work more on the claims side of the house and self-insured bankruptcy side of the house and settlement side of the house. There's not much crossover with our paralegal work into the special investigations department unless I need something from the paralegal that involves a particular case that I'm working on with special investigations.
Great, thank you. It's very helpful.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for Ben?
I just have a comment. Hi, this is Susan again. I really appreciated all the information and intel about the bottles of water with cameras in them and the purse cameras. I think that's really fun and interesting to hear about. So thank you for including that in your presentation.
Yeah, no problem.
Definitely.
We used to do a workers' comp outreach program where we'd go to a lot of vocational schools, high schools, and technical schools, and just schools all around Ohio. And I used to bring SID agents with me, and we talk about all aspects of the Bureau of Workers' Comp to the kids. But we used to do a part about SID, and I used to have them they'd bring a whole box of gadgets to show all the kids. And that was that was one of the coolest. I thought it was one of the coolest things, let alone the kids. So yeah, it's real interesting stuff.
I'm sure. Okay, well, Ben, it looks like we are just about at the 1 o'clock mark, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We thank you again for joining us today. This has been very informative and very interesting. I never would have thought of drones. That's quite the thing. But thank you so much for sharing with us. We appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As always, we thank the folks at Spectrum Reporting who provide the Zoom link and record our sessions. Today's session will be up on the website under the members only tab in probably 3 or 4 weeks. So if you'd like to come back and review, you can feel free to do that. Just a couple of quick follow-up items in addition to Paralegal Day tickets being available for purchase. We have a couple of upcoming events, and I apologize. This past Tuesday, we were supposed to have our general membership meeting, and I was supposed to present on billable hours and taming the savage beast. I was laid low by a virus and had no voice on Tuesday, and so we had to cancel that session, and we will reschedule it and in the near future. So that information will be coming out soon. On Thursday, April 25th, Morgan Morissette, who is the State Pro Bono Coordinator for Catholic Charities Diocese of Cleveland, will be presenting to us about immigration. She's calling her our presentation Immigration 101, and she will provide an overview of the immigration and asylum processes and give ideas about how paralegals might be able to get involved. And I also real quickly want to, oh goodness, I want to go to the events calendar and let you know about next month's workers' comp roundtable session. That will take place, no, that's June. May, that will take place on Thursday, May the 16th. And joining us at that time will be Sue Raudebush. She is an attorney, I believe, with Taft, and she will be presenting to us about the VSSR process. So registration will go live for that today or tomorrow. So check the website, make sure that you sign up for that. And for any other of our events that are coming up, just see the events calendar on the website.